SUVs, crossovers, they've taken on the world in all shapes and sizes. And ever since they entered the compact category, they've dented the sedans quite badly. But premium hatchbacks, they seem to be quite unfazed by it. Now, there is a very interesting way to look at it. A premium hatchback is sort of a status symbol. It tells the world that you were willing to stretch, you wanted to go the extra distance, pay the money, pay the top buck for the best that's available. Whereas the compact crossover, that looks like a bit of a compromise, something that you settled for because you didn't want to stretch all the way to a mid-size SUV or a crossover or something even higher up. And that's the reason why over the years, the premium hatchback category has just shown growth year on year, and that's a very good thing. Now, in the premium hatchback category, Hyundai is a very important player. They gave us the Getz, then they brought in 2 generations of the i20. So now, obviously, they're betting big on this. This is the 3rd generation i20 without any prefixes, without any suffixes, because it doesn't need one. It looks all new, and boy, does it look good. The sharp look of the new i20 makes it more aerodynamic than before. But you wouldn't buy a new car for its aerodynamic value, would you? But you will certainly want the car if the design is appealing. And with the i20, Hyundai is targeting those who care for sharp cuts and creases and radical styling bits. Gone is the safe approach taken by the previous i20s, and in comes a more bold design language. Take the Z-shaped taillights for example, or the rear diffuser element that is even available on a practical diesel variant. To that effect, it even gets a splitter on the front bumper, which goes well with the exaggerated sculpting of the bumper around the fog lamps. The face of the new i20 looks quite handsome and quite sharp. Now, that signature cascading grille, it's grown in size to merge with the headlamps. There's a complex detailing on the grille as well as the headlights. And I really like the detail, the attention to detail. You see these honeycomb patterns inside the headlight, looks quite nice. I also like how they've done the brow for the LED DRL signature. It's not too in your face, not something like the new upcoming Hyundai Tucson. This one looks not very conventional, but at the same time, it looks very nice, doesn't go too radical, too in your face, and I like that. I also like how they've included this small i20 emblem within the headlight, gives it a little bit of a sophisticated look. Now, in terms of the bonnet, you see these 2 creases nicely converging into the Hyundai logo. Now, this kind of a design trait, it's come from sports cars, and that is what gives this face a bit of an athletic stance, but it's also an ode to the original i20. Speaking of which, you also get these creases on the side, which again remind me of the Getz. But overall, I think it nicely maintains the lineage established by the Getz, and at the same time looks fresh, looks like a futuristic product, and looks quite handsome in the bargain. The side profile maintains the classic squat proportions of an i20. And the car still rides on 16-inch rims, which have 2 design choices that complement the sharp styling cues of the car. There's tons of chrome on the side as well, but an option to have it in black would have been nice. You can choose a black roof, however, on the red or the white paint schemes. While I like the placement of the i20 emblem in the headlamp, I'm not sure if I like it in the taillight. You also have it on the side skirts. That's a little too much branding in my opinion, especially when the other big i20 logo sits right here. What I do like, however, is this black applique. I think it looks quite nice. We've seen something similar on the Sonet, the Kia Sonet, but there it's integrated flush in line with the windscreen, and that gives it a sort of a wraparound effect for the rear windscreen. Here it protrudes out a little bit, so visually it gives the idea of a more elongated form, and I think that certainly works in this car's favor. And since there are too many little things, small details in this car to spot and feel good about, what I really like are these little dotted pattern that they've given on the fuel filler cap. Not that you need it to open the cap, but it's just another little attention to detail, and I quite like it. The Hyundai Getz is the spiritual granddaddy of the new i20. But over the 4 generations, Hyundai's premium hatchback contender has grown in size. It still cuts under 4 meters in length to meet the regulations though. Even the wheelbase for the new i20 has gone up, and with new age packaging, that means that you have better space management as well. So the boot space, it's gone up, it's 311 liters now, which is a big improvement over the outgoing car, but still not class leading. Now this very small suitcase goes in quite easily. Shouldn't be a problem with a smaller bag like this, but for bigger suitcases, well, you're going to have to sort of squeeze in some space. The boot lip is quite tall as well, so with heavier items, you're going to need a little bit of muscle to pick it up. Rear seat space. That was always a problem with the i20, which was sort of okay until the time it was competing with the likes of the Polo. But with the Polo having improved internationally, and now with newer cars like the Baleno and the Glanza to compete with, the i20 certainly needs better space in the back, and that's exactly what the third generation model has got. You can see the kind of knee room, leg space, headroom that I have, but taller passengers had a problem with the previous i20 when it came to headroom. In the new one, the roof liner has been nicely scooped out, so even if you are a 6-footer, I think you should be nice and comfortable in here. But if you are that tall and if you feel that this is quite claustrophobic and the height is not good enough or the headroom is not good enough, do let us know in the comment section below. We would love to know. Now, in terms of the features, you get rear AC vents, you also get a place to keep your phone, and this USB charger right here, or the USB port right here, is a fast charger. What it leaves me wanting for are cup holders in here, no cup holders at all. And this black upholstery, while it looks nice and sporty in the pictures, it is a lint magnet. As far as the space or the seating is concerned, I like the under thigh support. It's nice and supportive. I like the contouring. It's not too contoured, it's quite flat, but I like the angle of the backrest. And in the previous i20, it felt a little too upright. This one feels nice and comfortable. It's got good shoulder support as well, and you also get adjustable headrests, but only 2 of them. So 3 adults, not happening. 2 adults and a kid should be good. Even with this central armrest placed in, there is this little bit of bump that you get in here, but I think a kid should be fine, is what I think. Overall, this is a nice place to be in. It's got a nice roomy feeling to it, and I quite like it. In terms of figures, the headroom is actually 3mm lesser, but the lower seating angle claims to improve usable space. The legroom at the rear is up by 88mm, while shoulder room is wider by 40mm at the rear and 30mm at the front. So there's the Hyundai Mobis customization program for the i20 as well, which allows you to have 3 different kinds of customization packages priced at I think 15, 20 and 25,000 rupees, which add quite a few accessories, some chrome garnish here and there, some extra matting inside the car and all that. But be a little careful when you're choosing all of that. Make sure that you test it out nicely before you sign up for it and pay that kind of money, because we found out that some of the mats, they're not really great, especially here at the front at the driver's seat. They sort of intrude into the footwell, and they make the pressure that you apply on the pedals, like the brake pedal, the accelerator pedal, that can sort of go for a toss. It's inconsistent, so be very careful when choosing these kind of accessories. It may actually be a safety hazard as well, so be very careful about it. Now, talking about the cabin itself, the first thing that I like is the seating. It's nice and supportive. I like the contouring on these seats. They are very well contoured, more so at the front, and I also like that the cushioning on the sides is actually firmer than the outgoing model, so that also holds you a little better in place, and that's what I like. You get that nice and snug fit. Now, in terms of the layout, I like the design of the new steering wheel. I also like this instrumentation which has come directly from the Verna. What I also like is the infotainment. It's the big 10.25-inch screen. We've seen it in the new sub 4 meter crossovers from the group, and this one now makes it to the i20 as well. What also comes with it in the top spec trims is the Bose audio system. Now, we have told you in the past that the Bose audio in the higher end vehicles from Hyundai and Kia has felt a little hollow, so to speak. This one, however, has a much better bass. It's got much better lower frequencies as well, and it sounds quite nice, especially because the size of the car is smaller, the size of the cabin is smaller. It tends to fill up this cabin with much more crisper audio. In terms of the layout, well, here's what I need to draw your attention to. The AC vents, they are nicely complemented by these this ridge design that you see. It's a bit German, but then again, the designer for the i20 has his roots in Volkswagen, so that sort of explains where this design is coming from. But I like how harmonious this design looks. I even like the attention to detail in here. For example, this 12-volt socket cover, usually it's round. Here they have gone with a more rectangular arrangement. It goes with the theme, it goes with that angular theme that this cabin is establishing. In terms of the colors, you get an all black layout. That's the only one to choose from. Hyundai has given up on their favorite black and beige. They have not done a light gray or a dark gray like they did in the Grand i10 Neos, the i10 Neos, sorry. But I think it looks quite nice. It looks quite sporty. Like I said, the only downside to that is the upholstery being a lint magnet, but otherwise I think I quite like it. There's a nice tactile feel to the switches, which is again a very good thing. But here on top, the plastics are the scratchy type and they feel a little too hard. Soft touch materials would have perfectly gone in with this premium poise that this cabin establishes. There is the Blue Link connected tech on board, some functions of which are even available on the Apple Watch now, along with a custom watch face. Apart from the usual remote start-stop, vehicle tracking, geofencing, SOS, RSA and call center support, the i20 also gets over-the-air map updates. On the topic of AC vents, if you remember in my Creta review, I had mentioned that the vents can't be individually shut off. Thankfully, in the i20, they can be. So if your co-passenger doesn't want the AC vent or the blow from the AC vent, they can shut it off if they like, which is a very good thing. Now to go nitpicking. It's a good thing that you have the air purifier in this, but we've seen that Hyundai can integrate this in the lid for the center armrest, and they ought to have done that with the i20, especially given the dearth of cup holders in this car. They should have done that because this again takes up a cup holder like the way it does in the Venue. Otherwise, this is a more advanced unit than what you get in the Venue, which again is a very good thing. If you have OCD, there's a bit of an OCD disaster in here, and that's in the form of the wireless charger. Now the wireless charger, it is parallel to the tunnel console, but because the dashboard is sort of angled towards the driver, because all the controls are angled towards the driver, it sits at a different angle than the rest of the dashboard, and that I just know that it's not a proper straight line, and that is a bit of an OCD disaster. But otherwise, it's a nice feature to have. It's a cool wireless charger, and it's a very fast wireless charger. In fact, I began this drive with hardly 10% on the battery. I forgot to charge it last night, and by the time I reached the shoot location, my phone was already charged up. So there are a few hits and misses, but overall, this cabin gives you the feel of a nice premium car. The i20 secures the cabin with front, side and curtain airbags, but the latter are only available with the range-topping trim in typical Hyundai fashion. The i20 also comes with a Highline tire pressure monitoring system, ISOFIX mounts in the rear, hill start assist which works as intended, and most of the variants also come with emergency braking hazard lights, a reversing camera with dynamic guidelines and automatic headlights. Hyundai says that the third generation i20 is about 100 kilos lighter than before. Now, these chassis, they have high-strength steels, advanced high-strength steels, and these two materials contributed to about 16% of the overall material mix for the chassis when it came to the first generation i20. In the Elite i20, these two materials contributed to about 42% of the chassis mix, and now with the third generation, it is 66%, which is on par with likes of the Venue or even the Creta. So in terms of the premium factor, in terms of the build quality, it is right up there with the premium cars that Hyundai has to offer. So the new chassis is not only safer, but it also offers better rigidity for improved dynamics and high-speed stability. Even speeds above 150 km an hour don't seem to make the i20 feel floaty, which is a very good thing. Now in terms of the driving dynamics, in terms of its handling manners, it's a big improvement over the outgoing i20. Of course, this is not the sharpest tool in the business. This is not the sharpest hatchback out there. I would still prefer something like a Polo, though it does show its age. But that said, this has a bit of an understeery nature. This does feel a little understeery, but it's not as pronounced as the old i20 or even for that matter, the current Verna. This one feels a little more precise than that, but it's certainly not as sharp as something like a Swift. It certainly doesn't feel as athletic around the bends as something like a Suzuki Swift. There is traction control too, and it didn't seem to kick in as often under acceleration or around bends as it did with the Creta or the Verna, which shows that the new chassis is quite sorted as well. But if you're a driving enthusiast and want to hit winding roads often, you're better off with a Polo or a Figo. In terms of the steering, it has a nice damped feel to it. It does lack feedback, but it doesn't feel as vague as the typical Hyundai steerings of the past, especially the one on the i20 as well. So this one has a much nicer feeling than that. It feels like a European car in that sense. And the only nitpicking that I would really do is that I would like a little bit more feedback, and I would like it to weigh up at highway speeds. It remains quite light even at triple digit speeds. But what you're going to love about this steering is how nice and easy it feels to drive in the city. With every new Hyundai product, the braking is just getting better and better. That spongy feel is going away, and I like that. Especially with the new i20, the brake pedal feel is very confident, it's nice and progressive, and even without the rear disc brakes, the brakes feel nice and bitey and confident without feeling overwhelming even at highway speeds, and that's a very good thing. What you will also like is the ride quality that this cabin offers. Now the new i20, it has a nice damped feel to its suspension setup, so even on bad roads like these, B roads, undulations at highway speeds, it takes on all of that quite nicely. It's only the sharper bumps or the narrow speed breakers or the joints in the road that is where it makes its firm edge evident. It feels a little European, so to say. It's not something that's a deal breaker at all. In fact, I like the kind of ride quality that this car now offers. A lot of you asked us if the ground clearance of this car is a matter of worry. Well, not exactly. We've driven on some B roads, we've gone over tall speed humps, we've taken it through some deep potholes, and we haven't scraped the underbody anywhere. So you have to maintain the kind of caution that you would with a sedan or a hatchback. If you don't want to do all of that, you're better off with a crossover or an SUV. A crossover or SUV will also give you a more commanding view of the road, whereas the i20 is your typical low-riding hatchback, but I quite like it. So Hyundai has widened the front windscreen by 50mm. While that may not sound like much, it does aid in better visibility. Not like the previous i20 had any problems with visibility, but additional space, additional visibility always helps. It just makes the driving a little bit safer. To that effect, even the A-pillars are nice and slim, so you get a good cornering visibility as well. As for the wing mirrors, their width has been increased as well, but they also have this nice little BMW M kind of design element where they have a wing to the inner side. I quite like it, it looks quite nice. And despite their wider size now, there is not much wind noise creeping over them at highway speeds. In fact, at triple digit speeds, this cabin remains quite silent, just the way you expect of a premium hatchback. The only downside is, despite having a wider space overall on the mirror, the left mirror does have a blind spot on the outside. So if the outer edge of the mirror was given a convex portion, that would have been better, that would have been safer, that would have added a little bit more visibility. The petrol engines are certainly the more silent options, while the diesel, despite its class-leading refinement, has a bit of a clatter creeping into the cabin beyond 2500 RPM. We also found the diesel engine to have a bit of a flat spot between the 1800 to 2200 RPM mark on our test car. And lingering in this zone would sometimes make the powertrain go numb for a moment before resuming the power delivery. Once past 2000 RPM, however, the power comes in as expected and there is no noticeable turbo lag to account for either. The clutch is also quite light and the springy nature is completely gone now. City tractability is great and performance on the highway is even better for the i20 diesel. Since the time of the Gets all the way to the Elite i20, there was a big performance gap between the petrol and the diesel counterparts. The diesel was the one to go for because it offered better mileage, longer range, better practicality and a punchier performance. And with the third generation i20, it still continues. You still have the diesel as the one that I would recommend. Now this is the 1.5 litre engine. It has impressed us in the past with the likes of the Sonnet, the Venue and even the Creta. In the i20 it puts out about 100 PS of power. It's got a nice punchy performance. It's got a very linear power delivery as well. And that is what I like about the engine. The only downside to this engine is that it doesn't come with an automatic option. So if you want these kind of features, you want this kind of space, you want the connected tech, you want this kind of performance from the diesel, and you also want the convenience of an automatic, you will have to choose maybe something like the Sonnet, because that's the only one that gives you this particular package with the convenience of a diesel auto. But you would have to shell out between 2.5 to 3 lakh rupees at least to get that vis-a-vis this. And Hyundai believes that there would be absolutely no takers for that kind of a price point for a hatchback. People would just migrate to a compact crossover or a sedan instead, which is the reason why a diesel auto has been given the miss with the new i20. That said, there's no dearth of engine options for the new i20, and there's something for every pocket size. We sampled the 1.5 diesel and the 1 litre turbo DCT for this test. While the diesel can't be had with an auto, the turbo petrol 1.0 can't be had with a conventional manual. You can only have it with a 6-speed clutchless transmission, which is the IMT, or a 7-speed DCT automatic. Now this is the same powertrain, this is the same drivetrain that also makes it to the global spec i20 N line, not to be confused with the 200 PS i20N. Now that N line also gets a racier bodywork, which the India spec i20 doesn't. The i20 with the turbo petrol only gets a turbo badge. They ought to have done something different with the bodywork. They ought to have given it that N-line bodywork. Just the way they have a different bodywork for the Werner turbo, they should have done that with the i20, because now with this kind of a handling package, with these kind of features, it is quite a sporty car and people would have opted for that kind of a look to go with it. Now, speaking of sporty car, you have to draw a parallel with the Polo 1.0 TSI, shouldn't you? Of course. So now in this package, in this tiny package, this 1 litre turbo petrol from Hyundai claims to catapult the, should I use that word, catapult? Let's do that. Should catapult the i20 from 0 to 100 in 9.9 seconds, which is still not as quick as the test times that we've got with the Polo TSI. So in the real world, I'm guessing it will be a little bit slower in our hands. So is it going to be as racy? Does it feel as quick as the Polo TSI? Well, it doesn't. In fact, if it is the joy of driving that you're looking at with the i20, like I said, it's the diesel that I would still go with. We like the 1 litre turbo for its smoothness and linear power delivery despite the turbocharging. If you are going to treat the new i20 as a city car, this is the powertrain that we would recommend. It doesn't feel very quick at low revs, but drives well around town, and the harder dab of the throttle will build speed quite rapidly for overtakes or for negotiating a gap in the traffic. To that effect, the gearbox is quick to respond, but it would have been nicer with paddle shifters. But the i20 Turbo will also make you stretch your budget quite a bit. Now the all-important question, is the new i20 worth the price? Because it is a tall asking price, especially for the range-topping variants. Now the short answer to that is, yes, it is worth the price. Let's try and explain with a longer answer. So Hyundai says if you were to compare the Asta O variants of the outgoing Elite i20 versus the new i20, the sum of all the features that the new i20 offers is about 190,000 or 2 lakh rupees. Take that with a pinch of salt, of course, but there's no denying the fact that all these features do add up, do give you that feel-good factor, and do make this car feel quite premium. And that is certainly worth in terms of the value. The value for the asking price is certainly up there, because there's no other hatchback that offers you these kind of features. And the amount of money that you're paying over and above the outgoing Elite i20 is not as much as the sum of all these parts. Now the bigger question is, will you want to stretch all the way to this particular price point for a hatchback? And the answer to that only lies with you. You see, the whole idea of a premium hatchback is that it should give you the convenience of the hatchback size without making it feel like a compromise when you compare it to a mid-size sedan. And I think the i20 does that quite nicely. It's always done that. It's always given you the level of features that, say, something like a Werner offers, without needing that extra space, without needing that extra size when you're driving the car in tight parking spots or in crowded cities. That's the whole idea or the appeal of a premium hatchback. And that is why it appeals to the cosmopolitan audience a lot more. And the new i20 continues to do that very well, because this, like I said, is the only hatchback that gives you the kind of features that it does. Connected tech, the Bose audio, the kind of drivability, the kind of engine options. There's no other hatchback that does that for you. So if you were to choose this over a mid-size sedan purely for the size of it, I think you would make a very good choice.
you.